If you're trying to conceive and feeling overwhelmed with fertility advice, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to Don't Tell Me to Relax, your fertility podcast and antidote to unhelpful fertility information. I'm Hannah, a fertility acupuncturist, teacher and campaigner for better fertility education. This podcast aims to empower and inform you about your menstrual cycle and fertility. It's basically all that information you didn't get in sex ed at school, with the aim of improving your understanding of your reproductive health and optimizing your fertility. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Don't Tell Me to Relax. I'm a little bit overexcited, actually, because it's me and Katy back in the hot seat doing a podcast together. And I feel like, Katy, it's been ages since we've done this.
Ages. I can't remember when we did it last.
No, I don't know, but I
Must have
feel
been the start
like,
of the year.
Yeah, it must have been the start of the
So
year.
when we
I feel
did the
like
2-week wait and the lowdown.
That's right.
Yeah.
And when was that? January?
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I feel like it is the end of March. I feel like I've had a year in 3 months because it has been so busy.
Yeah.
And I know that you have also been busy because you have been like taking over the world and she's been winning competitions. She is Woman of the Year Health and Wellness Expert for MyUV. We had the podcast awards where for Glow Mama. You've moved house and you've moved into a new clinic. So Katy, tell me all about it.
A lot, yeah. It's all like brilliant stuff. It's really exciting, and I am ready to kind of just settle down for a bit because it was a hectic start to the year. Had like the Conquer the Countdown course as well, starting Conceive tonight, which is really exciting.
Wow.
But so opened the clinic. I'm in my new clinic now, which is based in East London. It's been like a little dream come true situation. Like I'm in my dream location, and it's just nice to have somewhere that's your own, isn't it? I've never experienced that before. So it's just lots of exciting stuff happening.
Oh, well, I have just been to see your clinic this morning because we've got Bella starting there in May, and I can confirm it is absolutely gorgeous. It's such a lovely space. It's got such a nice feel to it, and the whole complex is dreamy, actually. I wish they had them in South London, but we're just not that trendy around here.
It's a really cool, like they're all converted shipping containers, and there's like 60 containers here, but there's like a facial place, a massage place, like lots of cool stuff going on. And I've got a little soft spot for it because my mum used to work on shipping containers, hilariously.
Aww.
So it's just kind of a nice full circle moment because she was desperate for me to dance on cruise ships when I was a dancer, and I was like, that is never going to happen. So I'll just work in a shipping container instead.
Yes. It's just a different version of the dream.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I imagine you're already busy there.
Yeah, it's good. Like it's not far at all from where I was working previously, where I was like renting rooms. So it's been easy for like my existing clients to come here, and really excited to have Bella in on Mondays. So we've got acupuncture here as well now, which is really exciting. I'd like be nice to like refer out people. I always asking, do you know a good acupuncturist? I'm like, I do, but they're not particularly close, or not fertility specialists. There's loads of acupuncturists around this way, but not necessarily like fertility. So amazing that Bella's come in. It was just really nice having you both here this morning. Like, it's all getting real.
I feel like it was just all meant to be.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just happens, doesn't it? Like things fall into place like without any planning, and it's like, that feels like the right thing to do.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Sort of, that's always the way that I think my business anyways, just kind of organically, just things just happen without much forethought, which makes it sound like really haphazard, but it's just the way that it is.
I totally understand. It's like it you don't need to think about the decisions, it just makes sense.
Yeah. They just fall into your lap and you go, yes, I'm going to give that a go.
Yeah. I love it.
So today we are going to be talking all about 5 things. The title of the podcast for today is 5 things everyone should know about their fertility. So I sort of feel like we're going full circle and back to basics on the sort of fertility awareness, because I just think we can't talk about this enough. And, it's always great to have a guest on and get specialist knowledge, but it's always really good to go back to the basics, because sometimes it's very easy to overlook the really simple but effective things when it comes to supporting your fertility. So we've decided on 5 areas and we're going to discuss them in turn. So do you want to kick off with number 1, Katy?
Yeah, so number one is to understand what is a fertile cycle. So I think this was one of our very first episodes. And like Hannah was just saying there, it's so important to come back to the basics because they're the things that often like slip the most easiest. That was a very strange way of saying it, but you understand what I
I
mean.
know what you mean.
Great. So understanding what a fertile cycle is. So thinking about what your bleed is like. I think there's a bit of misconception sometimes that having like really light periods is great because it's like not an inconvenience to you, but actually you don't want your period to be too light because we want to make sure that lining's building up in a nice and healthy way. And on the other end of the spectrum, you don't want it to be too heavy. Like if you're flooding your period products and having to change more than every couple of hours, then that's something that you want to be looking into as well. Thinking about the overall length of your menstrual cycle. So, again, not too long, not too short, about 25 to 35 days can be healthy, provided your ovulation is in a good place. So, we don't want your ovulation to be too early into the menstrual cycle. So, from about day 9, 10 onwards, is that about right? Yeah, sorry, I had to do the maths then, I couldn't think. Is kind of like a good time to start ovulating. And then up until about day 21, 22, depending on the overall length of your menstrual cycle. So, yeah, you can ovulate later in the cycle and still have a healthy cycle. That's definitely something that people ask me about, or they'll be like, oh, I ovulated on day 17, or like say I ovulated really late, it was day 17. It's like, it's not necessarily late, it just depends on the rest of your cycle. So always looking at each part of your cycle in context to the rest of it. The luteal phase, having a look at what's going on there and making sure that's a really nice, robust and healthy length because that's where the progesterone is kicking in. So 12 to 14 days is often what we say is kind of like an optimal length. I'm trying to think what other things like mucus. We want to be seeing mucus. We talk about mucus all the time. Yeah, that you're seeing mucus, that it's not like discolored. So you want it to be kind of like clear or kind of creamy in its texture. It shouldn't be particularly like yellow, green, grey, shouldn't smell, shouldn't be itchy. And that you're seeing that before you're ovulating. And like that's kind of like prime time to try. I think they're kind of some of the main in terms of like parameters of the menstrual cycle. Other things in terms of fertile cycle, like you don't want too much PMS, you don't want spotting, and like pain as well to be looked at. Like anything more than mild pain on the first day of your period like isn't ideal. Like there's going to naturally be some kind of at least sensation there perhaps, because at the end of the day your uterus is contracting, but it shouldn't be disruptive at all. It shouldn't be causing you to like require painkillers. So yeah, just thinking about what's going on with pain and other symptoms like that.
Great. And that is such a good recap, Katie. Thank you. Because, we are fortunate in many ways. I mean, we're going to go on and talk about male fertility, but your menstrual cycle does give you indicators of your fertility. So understanding it and knowing what is normal and what isn't, so that you can then get it investigated is like, it's like the first place to start. And I guess, following on, we did that podcast with the Lowdown recently about knowing what a fertile cycle looks like, so that, for example, if you come off contraception, it might be that the first few cycles are not fertile. You might ovulate sooner, you might ovulate later, you might not ovulate. And so knowing that, so you're not thinking that you've been trying for 6 months when actually you've only had 3 fertile cycles, can really help manage your own anxiety and expectations of what should and shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, such a good point about coming off contraception and that it can take a little bit of time for the cycles to sort themselves out. I've definitely seen that in my clients where like the luteal phases tend to be shorter post contraception and things. So yeah, just having an understanding of what the cycle looks like when it's in like a healthy place is it's a really important starting point. And like you say, then you can kind of question like, oh, okay, well, I'm seeing loads of spotting before my period, like let's look into that. So yeah, it's really important to understand what's good.
So I am going to talk about number 2, which is how much sex to have, because this is a very common question that we get in clinic. And so I often see 2 extremes. One is too much sex. So people feel like they need to have sex every single day. and the other is not enough sex. So people are often targeting their sex only around their ovulation window. And I think really the best approach is to start having sex every other day from when your period finishes. So that is going to be the kind of coverall off the window, really. And Katie and I were having a discussion around tracking and the advantages and disadvantages of tracking just before we came on air. And I guess the thing about if you have your period, you wait for your period to finish, and then you start having sex every other day, and you do that until you know that you've ovulated, then you know you've covered your window, and you know that you've done everything that you possibly can. And the reason why you need every other day and not every day is, number one, sperm stays alive. So sperm will live in your fertile mucus for between 3 to 7 days. Nobody really knows, but it's definitely going to stay alive. So even if you have sex before you ovulate, that sperm could still be the sperm that fertilizes the egg once the egg is released. So we know that also having sex before you actually ovulate, so you have sperm waiting for when that egg is released, is kind of a really good way of covering all those bases, because once that egg is released, it kind of not disintegrates, it kind of loses its ability to be fertilized as each hour passes. It doesn't it's best, I think it survives for between 12 and 24 hours. So you want that sperm waiting from the moment it's released from the follicle to really get it at its best. And the other thing to say is that sperm needs time to reinvigorate itself, kind of replenish itself, really, because if you're ejaculating too often, then you could argue that the kind of sperm isn't as fertile as it could possibly be, because it's kind of too much, basically. So every other day is what is recommended, and I think they are actually the NHS guidelines as well. They say every other day from when your period has finished. So that gives you some information and some guidelines. And the other thing to say is that is very common, that I've been seeing in clinic a lot recently, is this idea if you only have sex in the ovulation window, or you're waiting for your positive OPKs, and then you stop, and then the male partner, if he's not ejaculating again because you're not having sex for, let's say, 10 days or 2 weeks till the sort of fertile window has come round again, then that sperm is kind of sitting in the testicles, heating up and not being regularly ejaculated. So it's kind of like it's getting old and not at its best, and not at its most virile and potent, I guess. So even if you're not having sex right the way through your cycle, then it's important that your partner is regularly ejaculating. So every 2 to 3 days, so that when your fertile window comes round with your next cycle, that it's really good, fresh sperm that hasn't been sitting there in the pipes for a long time. So it's important that your partner, or if you're a man listening to this, that you do ejaculate every 2 to 3 days, regardless of whether you're having sex or not. Anything else to add to that, Katie?
I don't think so. I think, it's something that we see a lot, and that kind of thing of there becomes a lot of pressure around sex, and just to make sure you're, I guess, on a kind of a more like relational, is that
We'll have it.
I'm making stuff up today.
It is a Monday.
But like connecting with your partner and being intimate with your partner in ways that aren't just sex as well, I think can just help to make it not like this big thing of like, well, we only have sex and then it's a chore and that kind of thing. So I mean, that's kind of got a slightly different angle on it, which I'm sure you'll cover in another podcast. But
we have got a podcast coming out very soon about this very topic, because it's a difficult one, isn't it? And I think there are advantages of tracking, and we're always talking about tracking and ovulation predictor kits and knowing your fertile signs, and I think that they are great. I'm not saying that they're not, but I also think they can become quite stressful and stress inducing when it's like, okay, now's the fertile time, now we've got to have sex. Because I work with lots of people who say that then it puts pressure on their partner, then their partner can't perform, then they feel cross or upset, and it just becomes this kind of domino effect of sort of a sort of negative sort of cycle. And so I think sometimes not tracking and just thinking, okay, every other day through the cycle, until I've ovulated might be a good way if you are finding that ovulation predictor kits are too much. But again, using them to understand your cycle and getting yourself familiar with it is a really, really positive thing. It's just about working out, are they serving you or are they stressing you out?
I was just going to say very much that, like, sometimes there comes a point where it's just like, drop the charting for a cycle or two. Like, sometimes that's the best thing you can do for your mental health and then the health of your cycle, because if you're stressed out, then that's likely going to impact to some degree your cycle. So yeah, there's a time and a place for charting and not charting.
Yeah. Okay, back to you. Number 3.
Okay, so number 3, which is actually leading on quite nicely from what we were just speaking about, is that it can be male factor. So as I was just saying with point number 1 of understanding the cycle, or what a fertile cycle is, your menstrual cycle gives you loads of signs about the health of it, and we can read into a lot of what's going on and get ideas of like the direction of help that we need from what our cycle is telling us. Like, sometimes the cycle is referred to as the 5th vital sign. Whereas male factor, it's not always as easy to see the health of the semen just through what it looks like, for instance. In fact, unless there's like an infection there or something and it's like discolored, smelling, itching, any of those kinds of things, it's very hard to see like what the concentration of the sperm is, or like how the sperm themselves are shaped or not, if they're like misshapen. You can't see that from looking at some ejaculated semen. So looking into the health of your partner, or if you are a male listening to this, thinking about the things that you can do to support your overall health. And largely all the things that we talk about here to support the menstrual cycle will support sperm health as well. So I think just not letting your partner get away with it, being like, oh, it's right, like they're healthy, they run a lot, they eat well generally. Like, I think it's really important for males to be tested, because without testing it is really hard to see what the overall health of the semen is. And generally, like, the quality of semen is declining and has been for the last like 50 years or so. And we can see that in the WHO guidelines, like what the guidelines were for healthy/normal sperm several decades ago looks very different to what they do now. And even the WHO guidelines for what a normal semen analysis is, the parameters for what they say are normal are based on the 5th lowest percentile of healthy adult males. So the bar's really low for what we consider normal. So I think that's something else to consider, that even the guidelines that the NHS will use, like, they're there and like they're good to a point, but actually the bar is really, really low. So I would say if there's things you can do, even if your semen analysis is like good based on the standards your doctor will tell you, as a like fertility awareness practitioner with the training I've done, I would say there's like things that we can do to really improve sperm health beyond that. And a lot of that is various lifestyle factors, nutrition, like how you exercise, like Hannah was saying about heat on the testes and things like that as well.
Yeah, great. So, and I think the thing is that it's very easy, and I know there's a lot more awareness about it, but it is very easy to assume that a fertility issue is a female issue.
Yeah.
And that is outdated.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. So I am going to be talking about number 4, which is kind of similar, which kind of does follow on nicely. It's almost like we planned this, Katy. That follows on nicely from what you were saying, because mine is about don't wait to test. Because there is this general guideline from the NHS of that you need to have been trying for a year to test or investigate your fertility. And obviously over the age of 35, I think, or 36, they say 6 months. Wait for 6 months, but under the age you wait for 12 months. But I would say that first off, well, there's a few things to say, isn't there? One is that if you've got any underlying issue, health issue or reproductive health issue, so if you've got issues with your menstrual cycles, if you've got issues with your health, then don't wait to test. I would always go and investigate as soon as possible. And the other thing to say is, just following on from what you were saying, Katy, is that it's very difficult to know what a man's fertility is like because you can't view it. So, getting a sperm test done when you first start to conceive, it's not actually a stupid idea. It's actually a really good one, given you might have an issue but have absolutely no indication of it. So I always think investigating men, investigating if you have got an underlying condition, it's really important to do it as soon as possible. And in an ideal world, I would argue that everybody could, do with, checking your vitamin D levels, checking your iron levels, checking your thyroid, some really basic tests that can kind of give you some really helpful information or highlight issues that could then impact your fertility. It's not daft to do that immediately. And also nowadays, you don't have to do it through your GP. There are 1,000,001, at-home test kits that you can use. You can refer yourself privately for sperm testing. There is a lot more private medicine out there that is not ridiculously expensive that you might want to start investigating sooner rather than later. And lots of the podcast episodes talk about that. But the other thing I'm going to say, which is complete opposite to what I've just said, is that it does take time to conceive. And that is not unusual. So it's always this kind of weighing up of investigate or maybe do some basic tests. And then, assuming that everything is okay, giving yourself 6 to 12 months to conceive is actually completely normal. And it's not an indicator, just because it's taking 9 months or 12 months, it's not an indicator that there is an issue. I think it's just normal. And I think the problem is that, because we've all been sold that idea of if you're not on contraception and you have unprotected sex, you will conceive, then there is this kind of notion that we go into in adult life that, people do conceive quickly and that is the norm. And I would say that is absolutely not the norm. And the other thing that I think is, there's people who conceive really quickly. They love to shout about it. They
Yeah.
absolutely bloody
Yeah, they
love to
do.
say, oh, I just had to look at him and I fell pregnant. Those people often talk about it a lot. Rightly so, good on them, great. I'm so glad that that's happened and they've not had to struggle.
Mm.
But again, because of those kind of conversations, it can very easily feel like everybody conceives very quickly. And actually, you and I know, Katy, that we work with people at the opposite end of that spectrum,
Yeah.
where it does take time and it can take quite a few cycles. And it's usual for you to not conceive, even if you're having sex at the right time, even if there's no underlying issue. It's still about a 30 to 40% chance of conception each month, and that changes depending on your age. And so you're more likely to not get pregnant on any given cycle than to get pregnant. And nobody really can explain why that is. Like, why is it that there is sperm and there is egg and they are able to meet, but sometimes they don't? Like, it is a mystery, and we haven't got much closer in answering that question yet, because IVF clinics, where they're literally putting sperm and egg together, their conception rates sit at a similar place, don't they? They sit at around 30%. Obviously, it varies. So there's kind of like two prongs to this number 4. It's like test and investigate if you feel concerned, or if you've got areas that you're worried about, or if you have, lots of people have like gut instincts. Lots of people say, I always knew, or I always thought I would have problems. And I think, okay, well, go and investigate. Go and investigate on a very kind of not let's go crazy and spend thousands of pounds, but let's do all the basics. And then, tick all those things off. If everything is okay, then give yourself some time to have enough sex at the right time to give yourself the best possible chance of conceiving over X number of months. And what I often say to people is, give yourself a time frame. So give yourself okay, we're going to try for the rest of this year. And if it's not happened by Christmas, then we're going to go into the next steps and we're going to investigate X, Y, and Z. Because I feel like having a sort of plan and a boundaried idea of what you're going to do can really help you manage the anxiety, because it's very easy to spin out of control and kind of feel like it's not going to happen. So I think putting time frames on things with a clear plan of what your next steps are can really help you manage the process. And I think it's an important one to remember, that not everybody conceives immediately, and that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think just to like reiterate that point of like, it can take a little while to conceive, and like in the last couple of months I've had quite a few pregnancies in clinic, which is amazing. But when I think of the length of time a lot of them have been with me, or they've been trying before they saw me, and I would say it is about a year for a lot of them.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, like that is kind of statistically quite normal. And I get that it can be frustrating to be like, oh, it's not happened yet, when it is something you desperately want. But there is, like we say, there's so many factors with fertility that we just don't understand yet. And so yeah, just to kind of have a little bit of compassion for yourself, that like
Yeah.
it can take a bit of time, and like that's totally fine. But also to kind of recognize, like, if there's a gut instinct, if there's any things that we've just said about going on with your cycle that maybe aren't quite where we want them to be, then get those investigations done sooner, because it will only help you
Yeah.
get some answers.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the last one is lifestyle. And, it's not to be underestimated, the impact of our lifestyle. And I always, we say it many, many times on this podcast, it's not about being perfect. It's not about, not doing anything ever. It's just about having a really good, honest look at the areas of your health or areas of your life that impact your health and therefore can have a knock-on effect to your fertility. So, Katie, do you want to pick a couple and I'll do a couple?
Yeah. Suddenly like,
What are they? What do
what
we
is
talk about?
lifestyle? What is that thing that I talk about every day? I guess the obvious one is stress and
Yeah.
managing that, and the effect that can have on your nervous system particularly. And if that's out of whack, then the difference that can make to you on a hormonal level, like cortisol is one of those big stress hormones, and that has a huge influence on what happens with your sex hormones. So then that will be impacting your cycle, your sperm health. So yeah, thinking of ways for you to manage stress. So whether that is looking at your workload and if that needs to change, just looking at the overall pace of your life. Are you like rushing around everywhere all the time? Like I definitely see that with a lot of clients. What other things are there? Stress, what is there? So finding ways to like wind down that aren't always exercise. I definitely see a lot of people, and the only way they can de-stress is exercise, and that's great. But if that's your only tool, then that can be a bit of an issue for some people. Thinking about therapies like we do with like reflexology and acupuncture, they do feel like a big off switch for the nervous system to settle down. And yeah, I'm drawing a blank today.
It's all right. I've got you. Because I've got some. So
Great,
I
good.
always think sleep, all the ones that are free. So,
Yeah.
Going to bed. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? And in fact, I am going to do a whole episode on sleep
Yeah.
because it's like the under-resourced free resource that can have such a huge difference to how we feel. So going to bed at the same time, really good sleep hygiene, going to sleep in a dark room, all of those things. It sounds simple, it sounds basic, but how many of us don't do it correctly?
Yeah.
Loads of us.
Yeah.
So sleep is a really good one. Obviously, nutrition and making sure you're eating food that looks like food. Someone said that to me the other day, and I was like, oh my God, yeah, that's so simple. Eating food that looks like food. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
And I was thinking about that. And
Yeah.
I was thinking about a fish finger, and I was like, yeah, that doesn't look like food, does it? Compared to like, I don't know, a piece of broccoli or something.
Yeah.
So, again, it doesn't have to be rocket science, but it is really important to be eating the veg and not eating the processed stuff and eating the stuff that looks like food that you cook from scratch. It can make a big difference. Taking some good supplements, vitamin D, folic acid, looking at your diet and looking at where you might need extra supplementary support. Working with a nutritionist, really, really helpful. Drinking water, Katie, just drinking water.
Yeah. It is all those like really simple free things. Like I think about this all the time, and they're so easy to overlook because like we suddenly think like we need to be exercising in line with our cycle, and we need to like plan our whole life to our cycle. And it's like, yeah, that's all well and good, but if you're not like sleeping,
Yeah.
then, or like if you're taking loads of supplements but you're not actually eating like a nutritious diet,
Yeah.
then yeah, the free easy stuff
Yeah.
is honestly some of the most important stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, just thinking, I think other things as well, like things that we've sort of really, really normalized are like having like a coffee as soon as you wake up, and it's like, no, like eat before you have your caffeine and all of those kind of things. Like
Yeah.
they've just really helped to like settle your system to not be so like wired all the time. I think
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of the lifestyle stuff, is like giving sort of signals to your body to be like, okay, we're in like a safe environment, like we're well resourced, there's like food available to us, like we've got a good environment that we can relax and sleep in, and like that just will do wonders for your body.
Yeah. It underpins everything, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's funny because I've just been following somebody on Instagram recently who talks a lot around sort of brain health and dementia. And everything that she says is completely correct. And everything that she says is completely relevant for fertility as well. And so, it's not like there is a secret that is especially for fertility.
I think
It's
like
just, it's health, isn't it?
yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, that like everything that we're saying isn't anything different really to what like your GP is going to tell you for general health and well-being, because that's what you need. Like as a human, we need those basic fundamental needs met, otherwise like what can you build from?
Yeah. Okay, so I think we've done. Have we got anything else to add to the top 5? I think they are I mean, there's loads, isn't there? But I think they are the most important, aren't they? It's like understand your cycle, have enough sex, test, think about the male factor, and look at your lifestyle. And I know that all sounds really simple and straightforward, but it is important to just go back to the basics. And I know this won't appeal to everybody. People might be further into their journey and they might have all of this covered. But it also is important that, you just go back and do have a look over all these areas. And if there are areas you can kind of make some changes, then it's definitely something that's going to help. So I hope that this has been helpful. Katy, it's so nice to podcast with you again.
It's been really nice. I've missed it.
We need to book in some more now that everything is kind of like, after when we come outside of Easter, I feel like, I don't know, I always think that things are going to be calmer or less busy, but it just never seems to happen. But hopefully we'll find some times.
I had I was lying in bed the other night and I had loads of podcast ideas, and I was like, I must write these down so then I can tell Hannah. Can I remember any of them? No. And they were brilliant.
Oh, damn it.
They were really good.
Well, they must be in there somewhere.
They'll be in there. I hope they're in there. Otherwise, I don't.
I always think that kind of stuff comes out when you've got some space in your brain. Probably like came out at night because you weren't thinking about 1,001 other things.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, make sure you've got some nice wind down time, everyone, before you go to bed. So
yeah. Well, thank you for listening. I hope this has been helpful. I will link to a few different episodes on the bottom of this podcast as well, because there are some, if you want to go into more detail into fertile cycles, into tracking your cycle, into testing, then obviously there's a lot more back in the podcast. And now this is going to be episode number 51, Katy.
I was just going to say, I was looking the other day and I was like, oh my God, that was like episode 49 or something that I saw. And I was like,
51. Can you believe it?
That's mad.
Yeah. So I am going to...
Congrats to you, because you've done every bloody one of them.
Thanks. I can't. Anyway, who knows where that time has gone, but I will link back to previous episodes. And I did say last week on Instagram that I was having a break. I am having a break. This is going to be the last one. I forgot. I am going to do this one.
I forgot I was going to have a break.
I forgot. Then there's going to be a 2-week break, and then the podcast will be coming back. So, don't think we've gone anywhere. We're just having a little holiday. All right, my lovely. I will see you again soon.
See you soon.
If you've enjoyed listening to this and want to find out more, then come and join my free community in Facebook. We have loads of resources. You can catch up on all our previous webinars and be the first to know about forthcoming events. To sign up, just follow the link in the show notes. And if you'd like to work one-to-one with myself or one of the team, then please see our website, hannahpern.com, where you can book in directly or organise a discovery call to find out how we can support your fertility and your reproductive health.